welcome to the podcast, Colts Nation 365. This is episode number 11. And as always, I'm your host, Zach Boyd. Today, we're joined by special guest Kevin Bowen. He writes for 107.5 The Fan. Catch him out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media platforms. Covers all things Colts, all things Pacers. How you doing today, Kevin?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Zach. I appreciate it.
Hey, absolutely, man. So we'll just kind of go right here, man. On Saturday, I'm sitting around kind of doom and gloom, feeling sorry for myself. And then Dan Graziano puts up a video of Andrew Luck, and I feel like he just injected a little bit of hope or a little bit of faith into everybody. What are your thoughts on that video? Are we reading too much into that, or should we have faith and hope?
I think that is a very accurate way to put it. I do think the Colts fan base is looking for a little bit of life, and Andrew Luck provided that, and Dan Graziano captured it. And I don't think it's anything to where we should, feel like you're being misled or it was just a bit of a pony show to put him out there in front of all those cameras. I think there was a lot of validity to the movements Andrew Luck was doing, the fact that he was so willing to do them in a public setting. I think all those are great, great signs. Now, as we record this right now, we still don't know if he's going to practice this week. I think that is a massive step for him that needs to be taken, because now it's all about how do you bounce back from those sorts of movements? How do you bounce back from, limited practices, full games, all those things, because time is ticking. You are 2.5 weeks away from the start of the regular season, and you've practiced 3 times the entire offseason and very limited in each of those sessions. So, but again, I think it was a very, very positive sense of the lateral movement, the side-to-side ability that he did, and the fact that he was so willing to do it in such a public setting.
Yeah, I mean, he's very, very private. So for him to be able to let us kind of into his world and into his rehab was kind of cool for Colts Nation. I think we kind of needed that. Is Andrew Luck going to have to just come to grips that he's going to have to play through some pain this year if he wants to play?
Yeah, I think he has to, and I also am glad that, you mentioned the Luck and how private he is. It's almost like we need evidence of that, because now that the Colts are done with training camp, we're not going to get any more open practices. I mean, practice is closed. We watch about 20 minutes of practice, and that's it. These are not the open, full 2-hour sessions like you would get at training camp. These are closed sessions. The media watches, again, just about stretching and individual drills, and that's it. So we're kind of at the mercy of the Colts for them to tell us how much Andrew Luck has practiced leading into the regular season. So that's why I also think Saturday was big, seeing that video. As far as when you look at Luck and playing through pain, I do think he's got to come to the realization that, all right, the NFL season is here. A lot of guys aren't 100% when the season starts. They certainly aren't 100% when the season ends. Can I play through pain and not risk further damage? And that's the big caveat in this injury that we just don't know yet. And the Colts don't know yet. When Chris Ballard had the conference call a week ago Tuesday, he didn't know yet if this was something to where and play and he's not going to risk further damage. The Colts are open to him playing at 85 or 90%. But the big issue there is, can he do that consistently throughout the regular season and still be an above-average quarterback? And I think those are all answers the Colts are going to have to get here in the next couple weeks.
Hey, Kevin, let me run this by you real quick. Who's to blame when it comes down to the way they've handled these injuries? It's just, I would call it bizarre, and they really kind of don't do themselves some favors, because they always kind of predicate it on, we're just being overly cautious, not a big deal. So the tone that they use with the fans, and then it kind of comes back on them. Do you think it's the training staff? Do you think it's just a culmination of just bad luck? I mean, for all intents and purposes, or who do you think has the onus in this?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. In regards to Luck, it's something that if you could have nipped this in the bud back in the spring, I think that would have been huge. And I'm not sure if you could have, but if I have my $140 million quarterback, this might sound bad to say, but I'm probably going to invest a few more resources into his injury research than I am the 90th guy on the roster. That's going to keep me up at night, how Andrew Luck is doing on a day-to-day basis. And when he's getting an MRI in March, he's getting a shot in his calf in May, those are some worrisome moments for me. And I do feel like the Colts weren't very transparent in the spring. I mean, they kind of acted like this was no big deal. Clearly, it was a deal. Andrew Luck has practiced. As of today, the Colts have had 29 practices this offseason, 16 in training camp, 13 in the spring. And Andrew Luck has practiced 3 times, very limited in each one. He's the only player on the 90-man roster not to have taken part in a full team practice. So, part of this I do think is on Luck a bit, in that he's being so cautious with these injuries. And, is this a little bit on him just being maybe a little bit too hesitant with these things? Could he have, again, tested it out in a more strenuous way in the spring and gotten a bit of an answer? Because now we sit here with the regular season coming up here in a couple weeks, and we still aren't sure if we have that clear answer. So those would be some of my questions. Obviously, when you see the Colts ranked where they are year in and year out from an injury standpoint, I do think you have to question how this training staff and medical department has operated. I know that isn't the end-all, be-all answer. There are a lot of factors that go into injuries, and bad luck, like you said, is part of it. But having said that, when your team is consistently ranked near the bottom of the NFL in injuries, I think it's something that you have to look into.
Yeah, man. Last question about Luck, and we'll move on. In the media's eyes, he just doesn't seem very approachable. Is that hard to communicate when your star, your face of your franchise is the guy you look at? Everybody's coming out to see Andrew Luck, the face of the franchise. Is it hard as a guy in the media room to talk to a guy who, let's say, you want 10 minutes after the game and you get 5 minutes, you feel like you're getting cut off. How hard is that to communicate?
Yeah, I think it is a bit difficult. It's probably been always something that is maybe my one gripe with Luck, is that I just felt like he deserves to the franchise and to the fan base just a little bit longer when he is talking to the media. I didn't cover the team anywhere near as extensively as I do now when Peyton Manning was there. But the media is has made it very clear when Manning spoke, it was a solid 15 minutes every Wednesday at his locker, and then was very approachable after the game and just giving you exactly what you need. Luck is much more I want to cut things off, in the 5 to 7 minute mark max when he talks to the media. I do think when he speaks, he's become more candid in the past few years, which is nice. And I do think he's kind of pulled the curtain a little bit back in terms of allowing us to talk about injuries and things like that. But I just don't think we have still we just don't get as much transparency from him. And even with this injury situation, he hasn't talked since he's been hurt, which is something that I know, some injured guys, they don't talk at all. Other injured guys, they do talk. Luck has certainly taken the other side of it. So those are things that I would like to see from him. I know he has a pretty good perspective on just, being one of 53 inside that locker room. I think his teammates do appreciate that. But at the same time, you're the $140 million quarterback. You're the star of this franchise. I think offering the media, 10 to 15 minutes every Wednesday and then 10 minutes after every game, I think is very reasonable.
Yeah, man, let's just go in another direction here. What did you like and what did you not like about the game versus the Browns?
Well, I would say things that I did like. I thought Jacoby Brissett now goes into the final, major week of the preseason with some confidence. I thought that was a huge third drive for him. To be frank, he had struggled, and the offense had struggled, and his offensive line and his run game has given him no support here in the preseason. But I thought his ball placement was outstanding on that third drive. I thought he looked Andrew Luck-like in his ability to avoid some rushers and make some plays. I mean, there were a couple times where I thought, he was just deer in the headlights. Here comes a defender right at him, and Jacoby's able to sidestep him or do something like that and deliver a big ball, whether it was a play to Chester Rogers or a fourth down to Eric Ebron. I mean, those are some big-time plays from Jacoby Brissett. So I thought that was huge for him. I thought defensively, things I liked, but Justin Houston and Pierre Desir made a couple nice plays when the first-team defense was in the game. So I thought those were the positives from the starters. I mean, certainly we can list off guys like Deion Kane and Ross Travis and Chad Kelly as guys that I also thought played really well. Now areas where you struggled, I would go to the offensive line and the run game. They have been easily the biggest negative we've seen from the starters this preseason. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I would have liked to have seen a more dominant defense, especially when you had the starters in the game. They weren't terrible by any means, but Cleveland's offense, you had no Nick Chubb, no David Njoku, no Odell Beckham, no Jarvis Landry, obviously no Baker Mayfield, not even a Drew Stanton. They had Garrett Gilbert in the game as their third-string quarterback. If you look at the Colts, they had a lot more of their frontline offensive players in the game. Cleveland's O-line even rotated a bit from series to series when the starters were in there. So I would have liked to have seen just a little bit more dictating things from a defensive standpoint where they're getting off the field very quickly and not letting Garrett Gilbert have the sort of production that he did.
It's Kevin Bowen, nice enough to join us here at Colts Nation Podcast 365. Hey, Kevin, that's kind of interesting. It leads into my next question. Offensive line, we made a switch in the offseason, got rid of Gouge, brought in the Hall of Famer, Howard Mudd. We were pretty good with Gouge last year. I think we had a pretty good continuity to us. He's known for a guy who's a little more, abrasive, I guess would be the right word for Gouge. But he sure got results. To this point, you think it's just a culmination of we really haven't had all five play for a lot of time together, and it's just something that's going to work its way out as the season goes? Or is it something that we really need to start monitoring moving forward?
Well, I think it's something that you need to monitor a bit because even the guys that you would expect to be playing at a high level, they have not. Quentin Nelson struggled, I thought, in the preseason opener. Just a couple plays where you don't expect Nelson to be like that. He has not looked like the dominant all-pro in camp. Braden Smith in that opener against Buffalo, he gets beat on a third down pass rush play that leads to a sack as well. Now, when you look at Saturday's main culprits, a lot of it was Josh Andrews, who's filling in for Quentin Nelson. And, a lot of people can just kind of write that off as, okay, no big deal. It's Josh Andrews. He's the backup. Well, we know full well in the NFL, you better have 6, 7, 8 offensive linemen to survive a 16-game season. We saw what this line looked like early last year when Anthony Costanzo was out of the lineup. That was a huge loss and a big reason why the Colts started the year 1-5. So if Josh Andrews is your top interior backup, that is a bit worrisome considering what we saw out of him on Saturday afternoon. But I do think it is about getting those five together. Yes, you had 4 of the 5 in the lineup on Saturday. But I thought there was just some misidentification, some miscommunication stuff. I don't blame Marlon Mack at all. It seemed like every time Marlon Mack touched the ball, the line of scrimmage had not been reestablished, anywhere past the original line. If anything, Marlon Mack was having to dodge guys in the backfield. So I do think it's something that you have to monitor from a run game standpoint. And then pass protection-wise, a lot of it falls on Jacoby Brissett's shoulders, him and Ryan Kelly working together. Andrew Luck and Ryan Kelly being on the same page last year was a huge reason why the Colts were the best pass protecting in the NFL. So it's probably not something that we immediately think about or talk about when explaining the Luck to Brissett differences, but it needs to be mentioned that pass protection responsibilities, a lot of it falls on the quarterback and center's shoulders, those two guys working together. And I do think that's impacted some things here in the month of August.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see the running game, on a 3rd and 1, you kind of want to get that yard, But moving into that kind of transitions into running backs. How do you think Ballard feels about that running back room as we speak? I know we signed, Chandark West yesterday, has a history with the Chiefs with Chandark West. But it just seems like he's always kind of been shuffling in the offseason. He brought Jay Ajayi in, he brought some guys in. He's never been completely content. And I thought Jonathan Williams really, really was starting to kind of set himself apart. But how do you feel that Ballard feels about that running back room as we speak today?
Well, I think he likes it, but when you say how does he feel about it today, he's got a couple injuries to worry about. Jonathan Williams broke his rib in that game against the Browns. That's something to keep an eye on. It sounds like they feel like he can play through it, but we will have to see on that. Then you have Jordan Wilkins, who's been dealing with a foot issue now for I guess today might be 3 weeks. It's been at least 2 weeks for him, maybe a little bit longer. And so those are your number 3 and 4 running backs. So I think you have to bring some other guys in just purely for a practice standpoint to have able bodies be out there on Saturday against the Bears. But when healthy, I do think he likes that group. Yes, Spencer Ware was brought in to provide a veteran presence. You kick the tires on Deontay Foreman. That obviously doesn't work out with his injury. But I think when healthy, a four-man group of Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines, Jonathan Williams, and Jordan Wilkins is a core Chris Ballard likes. I thought Williams has had a really strong camp and preseason. Wilkins, I don't think gets enough credit for what he did last season. He's a guy that's bulked up a little bit in the offseason. I think if healthy, he can be a nice, third or fourth back as well for you. So I don't think it's so much of you're in panic mode. I just think right now you got a couple injuries. And I don't think either of them it necessarily will impact maybe their availability week one, but two guys you would like to see get back on the field just to provide some depth behind the very durable Marlon Mack, at least during training camp. He hasn't been very durable his first 2 seasons, but he's practiced every single day here this offseason. And then Nyheim Hines being that third down back for you.
Yeah, I guess we're going to hop into some Twitter questions here. Jake Briganti says, Kevin, will Deontay's impact on offense hurt Funchess, and do you think it's likely that Funchess is signed back next year?
Well, I think Deon Cain is coming. I think it's a great question. I have not been as impressed with Devin Funchess as I thought I would be coming into camp. But Deon Cain has been extremely impressive to me. Yes, there's been an occasional drop or two, and there's been several grabs where 80, 90% of the receivers on this team would not have made those types of catches, just not in his, normal catch radius or things like that. So I think Deon Cain is coming. I think there could be a point in this season where he definitely eats into the role of Devin Funchess. I know Frank Reich has a very specific kind of carved out role for Funchess. So I do think he is a guy that's still going to be playing a big role in this offense. But as of right now, I'd probably lean towards no on the re-sign, but that's really hard for me to say. I mean, I've got to watch the 2019 season unfold. I've got to see what Deon Cain looks like. I would say the Reese Fountain injury potentially impacts how much you're willing to give Devin Funchess next offseason. Now you might be willing to give him a little.
All right, we'll just jump right back into another Twitter question. Have you heard the Swag Kelly song?
I have heard it. So maybe if this doesn't work out, Chad's final chance in the NFL, he could go down that route. But yeah, I will be very curious to see what happens in mid-season. Suspension comes up after 2 weeks, and to see if the Colts bring him onto their practice squad or just exactly what will happen with him, because I do think he's done everything he can on the field here in the first 2 preseason games to show that he's capable of competing for a backup job at some point in the NFL, and we'll see if it's this time next year with the Colts.
All right, man. Last question on Twitter here. With Chris Ballard's interest in ex-Kansas City players, can you see a scenario where Eric Berry may be a part of the Colts?
I can't. I think that opportunity maybe was there at one point this offseason, but I think Chris Ballard really likes what he has at a safety position. And unfortunately, that safety group has already dealt with a lot of injuries. So I think adding a guy that's battled some very serious ailments, not only just injury-wise, but health-wise in the past few years is something that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. Malik Hooker and Clayton Geathers have been very healthy, especially Hooker this offseason. You traded up for Kari Willis for a reason. I think he's a guy that will earn some playing time as well. And they remain very high on George Odom as well. So I can't see that happening.
You surprised by Kendrick getting cut yesterday?
I was a little bit surprised just because if he went off playing time during the preseason, he's been getting in earlier, or definitely got in earlier than Matthias Farley on Saturday. I'm very interested to see how that, fifth safety spot plays out. Do the Colts feel like they need to have to definitely keep an eye on as well. But I think for the most part, when you look at safety, 4 guys are locks: Hooker, Geathers, Willis, and Odom. maybe it's Roland Milligan or Matthias Farley for that last spot. But with all the corner depth and Marvell Tell's ability to maybe play both spots, he could be a guy that factors in as well.
One last question here, man. Is Malik Hooker ready to take that next step this year? Coming off that ACL injury, usually takes one full year to recover. He just looks a one step faster to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
that?
He made a great play on Saturday, knocking that ball away on the Rock Ya-Sin pass interference penalty. I think we will learn if Malik Hooker is ready to take that next step, because I think he will be challenged vertically a lot more than he was this past season. A big reason why he wasn't challenged in 2018 is just because you played so many mediocre quarterbacks. Well, that's not the case in 2019. You're going to play some elite signal callers that I think will want to see if Malik Hooker can make those type of plays vertically, and just offenses that are more predicated on the chunk plays in the passing game. I think Hooker's looked really solid in camp. He doesn't get tested a whole lot with how this defense is set up, just wanting to funnel everything in front of them. So it's difficult to, I think, evaluate him on a purely numbers basis. He's been very honest in saying, as long as guys in the front are getting sacks and making tackles and the 8-play drives are ending without points, then I'm doing my job. But I do think he's going to have more opportunities with the ball in his area to make plays this season. So I think it is a critical year for him, and he will be tested. Might not be as much as he would like. He's going to be tested, and he's going to have to deliver for this team to reach the level that they want to reach here in 2019.
Okay, Kevin, real quick. Do you think Chad Kelly has a chance to have a future with the Indianapolis Colts?
I think he does, yeah. I mean, I think, let's say he behaves off the field this season and, can be a practice squad quarterback, assuming Andrew Luck and Jacoby Brissett are your 1 and 2 on the 53-man roster. Then this time next year, you assume Jacoby Brissett is somewhere else competing for a starting job. I'd sign a veteran and then have Chad Kelly and let those two guys kind of battle it out for the backup position. Now, his personality and his past history maybe don't lend towards the steady backup that you would like to have. But if this has really been a true wake-up call for him, then he's got talent. He was Denver's backup for a reason as a pretty young quarterback. So I think you give him a chance. Again, he's got to behave, which sounds so elementary to say, but with him, it's a huge, huge deal. And then I think you also bring in a veteran quarterback as well and let those two guys sort of compete. And, maybe having a young quarterback that is emerging is something the Colts want to do. That hasn't been the route typically with Andrew Luck as the backup until they got Jacoby Brissett. The days of Matt Hasselbeck and Drew Stanton being the backups, those are much more of a veteran voice early in Luck's career. But maybe there is a shift in thinking with Frank Reich and Chris Ballard.
All right. One last thing before we wrap up real quick. Got a great Twitter question. This is kind of Pacer-centric, but which holiday has the best impact for the Pacers this year? Justin or Aaron?
That's a good question.
I say Justin.
Yeah, I'll probably go with Justin as well. I don't know if that Summer League performance from Aaron Holiday is fresh in my mind, but I actually think T.J. McConnell is a decent pickup and was Philly's backup and gave them pretty good minutes for long stretches the last year. So I think Justin Holiday, especially early on in the year when Victor Oladipo is out, I think he's going to play an important role, especially on the defensive end of the floor, if he can give you some length at 6'6". So, I would put both of those guys probably in the 7, 8, 9 spots in your rotation. And so early in the year, they will get chances with Oladipo out. But definitely big seasons for a huge season for Aaron Holiday. You hear all this talk about he can be a starter, can be the future. Well, is Malcolm Brogdon now your future at point guard? Is a guy like T.J. McConnell going to come in here and be that definite backup, or is Aaron Holiday going to show you something? Because this is a guy that you don't think there's going to be a whole lot of development needed when you draft a guy that had played at such a high level in the Pac-12 for 3 years, played on the ball, played off the ball. You wouldn't think there would be a whole lot of adjustment compared to most rookies, but clearly we have seen that so far, and we'll find out here in a couple months just what the future holds for both those holidays.
Hey, Kevin, man, so glad you got a chance to join us today. You know, anybody who is part of my show, my creative team on the back end, they all know that, you know, you're a guy that I look up to in the media. So it just means a lot to me. I'm a small podcaster just getting my feet wet here, but it just means so much you took time out of your busy day. And we love what you're doing, man.
Well,
Thanks so
thank you for
much.
saying that, Zach. It means a lot. I was definitely in your shoes at one point, and I love what you're doing, and I really, really appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely, man.
Yep.
Take
See you,
care.
Zach.